what advice do you have for those that are interested in either a portfolio career or in starting their own organization or group or endeavor? Like, did you take business classes? Did you take, how did you get to the point where you could be your own manager with finances, with making sure that you're actually going to make some money at this and not end up, living in a van down by the river?
That is an excerpt from this wonderful conversation that I had with Jack Unzicker back in September in Denton, Texas. We are hanging outside at East Side, this fun hang in the Denton downtown area just off of the square. And Jack and I chatted for several hours, actually. And the first part of our conversation kind of resembled what I think of as a standard interview. I don't know if standard is the right word, but we were talking about Jack and his career. And then about halfway through this conversation, we kind of shifted gears and started talking really free range, freewheeling about all kinds of topics. And it occurred to me after we got done and I listened back, I realized wow, this is really 2 episodes. I rarely break up podcasts interviews into 2 episodes, but it seemed to make a ton of sense because the first one was all focused on, or largely focused on, what Jack has done in his path through the music world. And then we start talking about, you name it, finding meaning in life, teaching, double bass, super geekery, podcasting, creativity, finances, generosity, technology, and so many other things. So I thought, let's put out this as a second episode, and I'm just calling this the puzzle of our lives. Oh, by the way, I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations. If this is your first episode, welcome. Great to have you here. And Jack Unzicker is the double bass professor at the University of Texas, Arlington. He's one of the most active bassists in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Orchestral scene, chamber music scene, you name it. He's got a great story. He's a great guy. We've gotten to know each other over the past year and just can't say enough good things about Jack. So I really hope you enjoy this conversation. It is, like I said, at this place called East Side at night, a beautiful Texas evening with some very boisterous people at the table next to us. But the beauty of the microphones I have for live things means you can still hear us, but you'll hear very happy chaos in the background. No big deal. That's what's going on, though, the live setup. And so I just want to put this out there without any sort of editing, without stepping on it in any way, shape, or form. I just want you to be a fly on the wall, a silent participant in this conversation. And I think of this as like a little bit more of an autobiographical episode, which I do every 50 episodes maybe or something like that. Haven't done one in a while. So a lot of this episode is kind of about how things are going behind the scenes here with Contrabass Conversations and my own personal career and that sort of thing. I don't generally talk about myself on the podcast that much, but Jack and I talk about that. We talk also all kinds of things, teaching related, mentors. It's just a wonderful conversation. I would like to thank, and I don't want to interrupt this episode at all, so I want to give a shout out up front here to the English Double Bass book, George and Tom Martin's new project. You definitely need to check out theenglishdoublebass.com. This book is coming out in 2018. It is an example of the great English double bass makers of the 18th and 19th century. This beautiful, glossy, sort of three-dimensional, high-end art book, the perfect coffee table book for any double bass player. Again, EnglishDoubleBass.com will get you more information. And thank you to D'Addario Strings and Helicore strings I have been using on my basses, on student basses, on all kinds of basses for years. And they are engineered, designed, crafted at the D'Addario String Factory in New York. And you can get them in all kinds of variants: orchestral strings, hybrid strings, pizzicato strings, and solo strings, as well as different gauges. For years and years, I used the hybrid medium gauge. Then I switched to the hybrid heavy gauge. Then I moved over to another bass, and I started using the orchestral heavy gauge, then to the orchestral medium gauge. I've used the solo set. They are wonderful strings, incredibly reliable, And yeah, good stuff. I've probably had upwards of 100 students use D'Addario Helicores. They work great on all kinds of basses. So check them out. And thanks for sponsoring the podcast, guys. And thank you to A440 Violin Shop in beautiful Chicago, Illinois, my longtime adopted hometown. And A440 is located just west of Wrigley Field. If you're a Cubs fan or not, that's where it is. You can get there on the train. Parking's easy around there. They've got a fabulous selection of basses and bows. They do great work on instruments, setup, restoration, repairs. A440violinshop.com. Thank you to all the sponsors for the podcast, and thank you to Jack for this conversation. I know you're going to enjoy this conversation. And Jack starts this off by asking me the question I usually end interviews with. He asked me, what would I say to my 18-year-old self? What advice would I give my 18-year-old self? And I go into a circuitous, hopefully somewhat thoughtful answer. Here's the conversation. Thanks for listening and enjoy.
Yeah. What about you? What would you say to 18-year-old?
The simple answer is I wouldn't change anything.
Yeah.
If I could go back, it's I definitely have thought a lot about what if I'd gone to North Texas when I was 18 instead of going to Northwestern? What if I gone to North Texas when I was 22 instead of Northwestern? What if I'd gone all out? What if I hadn't been as successful on the freelance scene early on? Mm-hmm. And kind of lost that hunger to move on.
Yeah.
But I'm really happy doing what I'm doing now. Chatting with you here in Denton, Texas. So I regret nothing. But I think if I could go back to 18-year-old Jason, I'd just say relax, enjoy life. We are all going to be dead soon. Sorry about being dark. Yeah. But enjoy this day. And I think about that a lot these days. My wife and I will go do something. I'll say this has been a good day. We've enjoyed this day. Who knows what will happen tomorrow, but this has been a good day. Mm-hmm. I'm not concerned about whether this advertiser is going to stick with me or not. I'm not concerned about whether I'm going to get this gig or not or whatever. I'm just going to enjoy today. So I think living, with reasonable limits in the moment and just really not taking things for granted is something that I would tell my younger self for sure.
Yeah.
I think that was a sin of my youth.
Yeah. Why did you get into teaching?
It was totally backwards. I was resistant to teaching. I was not wanting to teach. I actively resisted teaching. Yeah. And I did not like my first experiences teaching. So I didn't start enjoy. So it was desperation and money, first of all, and then within about 2 years, but it took a solid 2 years, I started to enjoy some aspects of it, and then I started to realize what I think a lot of people realize, which is it feeds what you're working on, and it's this beautiful being part of the path and the continuum of what you've learned and what you hope to pass on to the later generation. But first of all, it was I need to make some money. And that's better, I guess, than getting in some other, going and working at Papa John's, maybe. Yeah. So I guess I'll do that.
What was your worst job that you ever had?
I've been fortunate. I haven't had that many bad jobs. But, I worked as a temp in the legal department at Citibank. And I was the most boring job. They were so nice, but I worked 46 hours a week. It was exactly 46 hours a week. I remember because I did. And I was so bored. I would just see how much coffee I could drink before I went crazy. And I learned. There was a point when I would but that job, that taught me a lot about what I didn't want to do, because I looked at all these people that were actually they're our age now, but they seemed very old to me at the time. Yeah. And I'm looking at these people, I'm their lives seem so black and white. I just did not, and so that redoubled my efforts to do not that.
Yeah.
That was the worst job. The job, this is pre computer dominance era. My job was to take all these legal binders, and there would be new 3-ring binder pages sent by the legal company, and I was to open the 3-ring binder and remove page 311A-4-C and replace it with the new 311.A-4-C. And the previous person doing that job had like jacked the books up horribly. So it's like I was trying to like it was like everything was messed up and like it was, so yeah, that's my worst job.
Do you ever have one of those moments where you look around and you see all these people on the weekend and they have like a day off and then they have another day off and then you think, who are these people? And then you think, wait, they have that every week?
Yeah,
they have a weekend.
Yeah, well, the work schedule thing is fascinating, and that's something that I have, like, consciously since I moved to San Francisco, tried to say yes to things that kept me busy during the weekdays, like my wife, and say no to things that kept me busy during the evenings and weekends.
Yeah,
which is what musicians traditionally do: is work on the evenings and weekends.
Right,
so, like,
holidays.
I thought about that a lot, and I think it's really easy as a musician to fall into the trapping of working 7 days a week.
Then I wouldn't recommend doing what I do, where I have the 9 to 5 at the university, and then I also play evenings, weekends, and holidays. So
right.
Actually, what I do, I can't say that. I mean, I am too busy for the family that I want to have. You know, that I want to be around more often, and my wife is really ready for me to be around more often than I have been since being on the tenure track. So I can't complain about that, but yeah, just from you and I talking, it's been nuts just with all the different orchestra schedule on top of.
Yeah, of course, it's certainly nuts, and so, like, of course, you would like to probably do less of that to spend more time with the family. Like, is there something about that work though? Because, and obviously, why do we do that? That is to, like, bring home some extra bacon, right?
Well, but I've got another reason too.
Okay.
I mean, how often does your dentist get applause when he finishes what he does?
So there's that, right? And that's something you don't necessarily get on the academic track of just teaching lessons. There's something beautiful about ending a day with applause.
Yeah,
right?
And it's so much fun. I mean, I love playing in all different respects. You know, I love playing in big band. I love playing electric bass in R&B groups and funk groups, and I love playing solo recitals. I love playing chamber music. But there's something about being in the orchestra and contributing to that sound. And I can't think of anything else like it. When you get, we do the Rite of Spring or something like that, and 105 musicians on stage, and just being a cog in that machinery is super satisfying.
Yeah,
and the repertoire is some of the best that's ever been written in the last centuries, it's great.
Because to me, I feel so sad, like playing in an awesome orchestra, playing something like Rite of Spring, Brahms, Brahms. I mean, they're not gonna. And it's the thing I thought a lot about over the years is, like, there's it's good. Ambiance.
Yeah,
like that. I totally dig that. I'm not sure if that scratches my creative itch necessarily, but I like it. I'm not sure what it is that it scratches, but I don't think it's my creative itch, because I thought a lot about, like, creativity in the orchestral musician. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And I don't know, have you thought about that at all? Like, because you do a lot of recitals.
Yeah, I haven't really. I mean, I can tell you that for some reason, being in a top 5 full-time orchestra has never been the end-all goal for me. And I've had lots of friends and colleagues that have had that and sought that out. And I can understand it because, there's the security. Hopefully, there's the security. It's been up and down with different groups, but I can understand that, and it is a clear path and a great job and great repertoire, great colleagues, and you can play some of the best musicians in the world, certainly the best soloists in the world every week. So I've always been a variety sort of person. So if you ask me, who's your favorite composer, or what's your favorite type of music, I like the variety. So if it's all vegetables for too long, it's not fun. If it's all meat, it's not too fun. If it's all potatoes, it's not. So I think being where I am and in the Metroplex here, I mean, there's such an opportunity for performance, even if I didn't travel as much as I have been. That I do get to scratch, chamber orchestra, one bass on a part, playing that repertoire, and then in a big symphony, and then chamber music with colleagues and doing a solo recital. occasionally playing some jazz, which I would love to do more. This area is pretty heavily saturated with incredible jazz players.
North Texas and the 1 O'Clock Band and all the people hanging out.
All the people that went through that program and then started working here and kept working here. I was going to ask you something else about how your teachers influenced you as far as the generosity that you have, as far as this desire of yours to reach out to the rest of the double bass community, to continue this process of learning and sharing and being an educator. And I'm wondering if you had any influences, because personally for me, I had such great and caring teachers and mentors and inspirational figures that I feel compelled, like it's my responsibility to carry that on to the next generation to the best of my ability, and to really teach to the individual and be there for the individual and help them through whatever issues they're having, whether they be musical or whatever, but just to be the sort of person that's a confidant and someone that can be a good listener and give good advice, hopefully, when it's needed, but just to be somebody to say, I'm so proud of you, I'm support what you're doing, and as long as you're working, we're gonna make progress and that sort of thing. But I'm just curious about you. Like, were you inspired by people that you worked with, or was this just your innate curiosity, or was it that you didn't get to study with this person, but now I can call him and pick his brain?
That's a nice side benefit,
yeah,
for sure. I've learned a lot doing that. But yeah, Michael Ovnani, the person I studied with the longest, 6 years, and definitely like Michael, curious, always experimenting, has gotten really into period performance and just so he was a major influence on just like being really open-minded. And I think I was, like so many people, I was really anxious about trying to land some sort of performance job, which I never really did, but like I was really focused on that, and like to the point where I had blinders on to anything else. I think Michael was a really good influence, just sort of seeing like, yeah, I'm playing the Chicago Symphony. That's cool. It's not that cool. No offense to Chicago Symphony, but like it was like it's just a thing. It's a job. I do this. I'm really into these other things. Yeah. And all these other Chicago. And so like, I think he was a big influence in terms of that. In terms of like what I'm doing now, I don't know if influence is the right word, but my buddy John Grillo from Philadelphia, it was just so fun too. I felt like I was just out there, like sort of like in the dark, like with my little like pocket knife, trying to create something. And John came along and said, well, why don't we connect with Ed Barker and Lawrence Hurst and all these people that I know so well. So he was I'm not sure, he was an influence on me in terms of just sort of expanding. I think I still had that scarcity sort of mindset of like everybody's fighting for everything and no one really wants to like help anybody else out. And John was helpful in like making me realize that tap into like the generosity of the bass world, and that's even like having early experience with Jeff Bradich and everything like that. I think I was much more of a scrappy, I need to get mine no matter what, freelancer mentality, and not really magnanimous, let's all learn together kind of mentality. Yeah. I think John was really helpful in terms of that. Michael and I have remained friends for 20 years now at this point. Yeah. And just having some contact with people that where I realize like whatever they may be doing professionally, or what I might think of like whatever ivory tower I put them in, that's inaccurate, and they're continuing to grow and learn on the same path. And whether they have some title or some dollar amount attached to them, it's kind of irrelevant, because we're all on the same path.
You may have come across this accidentally, but you're actually an incredibly good person to talk to about the opportunities in the music field, rather than how people are trying to say often that the orchestras are all folding, there's fewer and fewer jobs, the budgets are getting slashed left and right. And it depends on what part of the world you're in and what part of the country you're in. But thinking about new technologies and even in the school programs now, there's all sorts of music entrepreneurship programs and such. And you'd actually be a fantastic person to talk about. There's not one path anymore. It's not you get a job in a major orchestra, and through that position, you have the reputation to have a side gig as teaching at one of the universities to create a studio, and that's route one, right? What's the other route, which would be to do music ed, right, where you go into the public schools and you're teaching there and trying to hold on to as many playing opportunities as you can, playing in the regional orchestras that rehearse at night and play a concert on Saturday nights and stuff like that. Being a jazz musician, so playing combo gigs, maybe playing in a big band once a month, trying to do recordings and sell recordings and a totally different type of hustle, a different freelance hustle. But what advice do you have for students that say, I don't know if I really want to play in the orchestra. I see how competitive it is. I'm not sure if that lifestyle of playing 200 educational concerts a year is really what I want to be doing. What's been your experience since you changed your primary focus?
Sure, there is a moment right now of incredible opportunity. Here, we're talking the end of the summer 2017, that I am seeing so many people find incredible success, whether just playing the bass, and trying something outside of that orchestral or music ed or academia route or whatever you want to think of as like a route that people have gone down. And I can name so many people, like from Renan Meyer to Nick Villalobos to Louis Levitt with Sybarite 5 to what here in Texas Bossa Nova Quartet's doing.
Yeah,
I think there's an incredible opportunity for people to really carve out. I'm a huge fan of people creating new opportunities and not fighting for the same things that have an existence.
Right.
I think that's how we all go, because somebody started the Dallas Symphony, somebody started the Fort Worth Symphony, somebody started the Chicago Symphony. These were things that did not exist in perpetuity, somebody at some point started this. And you can start something, and it's not as hard as you think. And it doesn't have to be just a chamber group, but I would recommend, I think that's the most tangible thing that people can do if they want to do something in performance. Like what I do is so weird that it's hard to recommend. Do what I.
But you have a portfolio career, right?
I have a very portfolio career, and that's, I think that's going to be more and more people's careers going forward. But a great element to focus on, especially if you're young and you're playing and you're wanting to upgrade, is look at some of these models of Time for 3, Simply 3, Sybarite 5. Piano guys, the you name it. There are a lot of people out there doing something that is of their own creation. Now, I think that doesn't come at the expense of quality musicianship, and that's the thing. Is you don't want to just become I'm really good on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram.
Yeah,
I think it's taking all this can't come at the expense of becoming a master. There's regardless of what the career options are or aren't, there is value in becoming an absolute master of a craft. I think that if you have some creativity, there's a way to make that work for you, whether it's sprinting or double bass playing or oration or math or whatever.
Okay, so let's say they get their performance together. They've got the product. Right. So what advice do you have for those that are interested in either a portfolio career or in starting their own organization or group or endeavor? Did you take business classes? Did you take, how did you get to the point where you could be your own manager with finances, with making sure that you're actually going to make some money at this and not end up, living in a van down by the river?
Right.
And
it's such a big thing. It's where do you even start? And you can become paralyzed, right? So I think the most important thing to do is start. Don't worry.
Okay.
Do something.
Yeah.
Anything. Because 95% of people never start anything. And I can't tell you how many times in the last year, well, I can't tell you, 5 times in the last year I've had people talk to me about, I want to start a podcast, Jason. I have all these ideas, this and this and this, and I want to do this. Okay, we're good to go. And I have yet to see any of those podcasts. Right? Okay. Or it could be a YouTube channel, or it could be anything. Start.
Yeah.
And it's okay. Do whatever, because you know what? No one's watching or listening
right.
anyway.
Right.
And your first thing's going to be, do your best. Put all of it into it, and it's going to be bad. It'll be good for you right then, but 6 months down the road, it's going to be bad. So just start something. You've got to start putting out something on a regular basis.
Right.
Whether it's image-based, whether it's text-based, whether it's audio-based, whether it's video-based, doing something. Doesn't matter if you want to have a chamber group, or you want to be a teacher, or you want to do online courses, you want to do coaching or consulting or whatever. Start doing something and get in the habit of putting something out. And that's the first thing I would recommend. Before you do, I have lists of business podcasts that I'd recommend people listen to, and books. There's a list of books that a person that I follow and really find really inspiring, Michael O'Neill. He goes the Sexy 7. It's the 7 books you should read if you want to break off and do your own thing. And it's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, 4-Hour Work Week, a whole bunch of other books along those lines. But I think just make something. Seth Godin is an author I really love, and he's a kind of thought of as a marketing genius. And what he talks about is the innate satisfaction that you get when you can come up to someone and say, and you actually mentioned this earlier, say, here, I made this. And you can do that on a regular basis. I made this. And for me, it's I made this podcast. I put a podcast about Susan Cahill today.
Yeah. And you're excited about it because, you put some care into it. You did something new.
Exactly.
You're getting a little better. Yeah.
Right. And so another bit of advice. No one's really that interested in you. So if you want to build something up, be interested, and you will be interesting. You will become interesting.
That's great advice.
So focusing on like what I do, I didn't do this intentionally, although it might be a good model. Focus on others. Yeah. I started a series that I did for a while called Musical Innovators. Every week I put out a profile of 3 people doing things that are cool in the music world.
Yeah, I remember.
And they connected with me and this and that. So be outwardly focused. Don't worry so much about you and whether your chamber project, your courses, or your teaching, or your reed making business, or whatever you want to do is look out, find what's your jam, what are you interested in, what's going on that excites you, and find a way to feature that somehow regularly. And one more thing, not to talk your ear off, but like whatever you do, make sure that you build it in a way that goes to something you own. So go out, register yourname.com, yourname.something, whatever, because don't build what I see a lot of people try to build whatever they build on Facebook or Instagram.
And then move it, try to move it later once they have a following.
I spend a lot of time publicizing contemporaryconversations.myspace.com. It's not a wise move. Just register a URL, start creating some content. It's a very large type of people talk about it a lot, and that's a really good way to start to establish yourself as some sort of authority figure or presence. If you don't have a presence online, you essentially don't exist here in 2017. It's only going to be more in 2018 and 2019 and 2020.
So when you put out your first content and the trolls came hunting, how did you deal with them? Did you feed the trolls, Jason?
Troll. Well, and you'll get trolls to greater or lesser degrees doing what you're doing. I get way fewer trolls doing bass stuff than I did when I was talking about like how the music industry is collapsing, which I did for a while. And that can be hard. I think a good thing to realize is most people don't write in when they are digging what you're doing. Like Jack and I have been at the Bradage competition this week. Like I'm sitting there monitoring the Facebook Live feed. People are not writing in saying, Facebook Live's working great. No problems here. Works great, which probably is the majority of experiences. Like, my thing froze, this and this. But I can't hear it. I don't like this. Why can't I hear it? You know, so like you're good. The naysayers are more vocal than the people that are digging what you're doing. So it's challenging. A guy that I know from Chicago and he started an entrepreneurial venture. Started making this product, and I feel so bad for the guy. Like, the first 2 pieces of feedback he had, one was a troll. It's like, this terrible, and the next guy was like, yeah, but can it be taller? Like, oh man, and I just like resonated so much with that. It's like, oh man, that's just like what it is. It's like, and you just have to learn how to put that in context, and just realize like people say things online they would never say to you in person. And there's trolling, and there's honest feedback, and there's and you just, it's hard. It's a hard thing. The worst is, you know what? I liked what you used to do, but I don't think you're quite so good anymore. And that's like one that's like really cuts me to the bone. Like, you know, you used to talk about things that were really interesting, and it's not so interesting now. So like, if you ever get that, you know, it's like you just got to put it in context. It's hard. It's just. And YouTube is the lowest form of commentary. So if you get anything on YouTube, you can essentially disregard it, especially if it's negative. But yeah, it's a hard thing. It's something that everybody deals with at some point.
Yeah.
But knowing that the most vocal negative people tend to be more vocal than positive people. Yeah. And that anybody's recognizing what you're doing at all.
Yeah.
Try to frame it in a positive way.
I had a student that was a composition major, and we were talking about this idea of just starting to get it out there. And I said, you know, he was telling me about a composer that he really respects a lot that just is so prolific. I mean, just pouring stuff out. And I was like, you know, if you can get to that point where you're releasing so much content and people start to dislike it or talk about it unfavorably, and you're an artist and you're honing your craft and so forth, that you're going to be able to look back at it and be like, that was 22 pieces ago. Yeah. That's terrible, and I have no concern about that anymore because I'm working on this thing here. Yeah. And I agree with you, like, yeah, that was terrible, here we go, I'm working on that, and I'm trying new styles and just to stay focused on what your interests are, what are the things that you think you need to improve upon, because we all are our own worst critics.
Yes, certainly.
So you don't have to really worry about what anybody's going to say to you on a comment, because it's never going to be as bad as what you tell yourself routinely as you're working as an artist.
And if you can get into that abundance mindset, which is a popular term, but I think it's really important. Like people put out a lot of content. The more they put out, the more they realize like they're never going to run out of content. Woody Allen makes a new movie every year, right? Like it's if you can get into that momentum of creating content, all of a sudden, like what any one composition or podcast or blog post or photograph or whatever that impact may be, it's just like part of the greater picture, and we're like there's no downside right now as we speak to putting out a lot of content, because the worst thing that happens, and I've thought a lot about this is my philosophy, the worst thing that happens is people don't take it all in. But people aren't going to take all your stuff in anyway, because there's so much like coming through your feeds and everything, and like it gives you a chance to perfect what you do and to connect with more people and to hone your craft. And so I talk to a lot of podcasters who are very like concerned about it. It's like, okay, I'm going to do one podcast a week. And I'm like, I'll tell you, like people in the business world, they're doing one every day. Wow. And they have no expectation that anyone's going to listen to all of that.
Right.
But some people are going to listen to some of them. Right. And that's just the world we live in. Not that anyone listening has to create a video every day. Don't feel overwhelmed. But I would do one thing a week. Well, I would find a thing, whether that's blogging, vlogging, some sort of like content, Instagram, whatever. Instagram should be more frequent than that, but like commit to doing something once a week.
Yeah.
Once a week is a really good jam. And that's something that just about anybody in whatever circumstance they are in life can do.
Yeah.
Make something once a week and watch what happens and
I think that also has something to do with the length of the content as well,
Yeah, sure.
right? Like I have a daily podcast on composers, and it's 1 minute long.
Yeah, that's
and even if it's a composer that I have no familiarity with, and I hear the music in the intro, and I'm like, but I can make it through a minute every day and learn something interesting. And yeah, more often than not, I'm very glad that I've spent the entire minute listening to this. You know. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's a great example because like trying to do a documentary on Churchill one week and then a documentary on Eisenhower the next week. That's a lot to do. But maybe you could do like something about a month of Eisenhower, and then the next week do another month.
Yeah.
And what you discover is if you get in the habit of doing something on a regular basis, you can take all that content and combine and repurpose it in all sorts of interesting ways.
Yeah.
So creating things in public, I think, is a beautiful thing, and I wouldn't worry. People worry, but then they won't buy my thing. Well, no one's going to buy your thing anyway because they don't know about you.
Yeah,
there's really,
right.
I can't tell you how many authors
it's
there
like
are.
you're going to be another Brahms, you know. You're
Right.
going to spend 40 years on the first symphony, and what happened? Did everybody love it? Was it perfect? No.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But here comes 2, 3, and 4 right afterwards, and just think about how many more Brahms symphonies we would get to play if he had
if Brahms had just
taken the leap a little earlier. You know, 35 years to work on it instead of 40. We probably would have had another 2 symphonies. You know,
people buy like right now. Like showing process. People are fascinated by process. So, and I've read so much about this and watched and listened, and I really think it's true. Like, you want to write a book, great. Start right now and make it public. Right. Here's what I wanted for chapter 1.
You want to talk about goals, about ways of achieving goals?
Yeah.
You want to switch into that?
Yeah,
okay,
sure.
Let's. So accountability. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, you can keep going. I'm just
so
gonna
accountability.
Start,
Like, I'm going to write a book.
Make it
by
public.
the end of this year, and I'm going to put out one. I'm going to work on a chapter a month, and I'm going to do this online, and I'm going to put it out, and then I want you to, like, here's what I'm thinking, but I don't know if this is any good at all. I have no idea. This is what I'm thinking. What do you think? Give me your comments. This and this. Then the next week, okay, here's what I'm doing. Here's what I'm thinking. I'm going to read this next part. Doing something in public is incredibly powerful because you build an audience. And just being, the more honest you can be, the better. And you're seeing this. In
being
brands,
authentic in social media and anything like that is so key.
But musicians have a hard time with it.
Yeah.
We all have a hard time with it. And musicians have a hard time with this particularly because they're concerned with perfection. Because what do? We spend our time in practice rooms, fetishistically polishing little moments. Whereas what people really want to see is your raw self. So a good example, like, I'm going to play this recital in 6 months. Here we go. This is day 1 of reading this piece.
Yeah.
Listen to me read the first part. Then, like, talk about, I know I need to work on this. I know I need to work on this. Day 2, okay, here we go with this and this. I'm gonna focus on this section. What do you think? Do you think that was good? Is that better? What would you do?
Yeah.
Any sort of way that you can get people to follow along and join you in your journey in a really human, authentic way. That's power.
What about incentives and punishments? Have you ever experimented with those?
They can work really. I have not personally experimented with that, but you can definitely do that. Like, if I'm not ready, I'm strutting naked through the streets of San Francisco or whatever, whatever your punishment might be.
Well, my favorite one to offer people is, okay, write me a check to the political person that you can't stand the most. Yeah. No. She's gonna write a check, I guess. She's in. So you write a check and you give it to me, and then we're gonna check in. We set a deadline, and if you haven't met the goal, then I'm sending that check in, and you're financially supporting somebody that you just couldn't fathom the idea of it.
I have not done that, but that's a good motivator.
Incentives are the other part of it, where, like, if you do achieve it, then you figure out something that's going to be nice. There's incentive bundling as well, where you take a difficult task that you don't want to do and you bundle it with something that you do like to do. So
yeah.
you can only go on Facebook after you've hit the treadmill, something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or until you've played your scales and arpeggios and 5 minutes of spiccato. So.
Yeah, incentives and rewards and punishment can be brutally effective. And I've heard lots of examples of people that have done contribution to the political party that you are morally opposed to.
Some other things, and I know you and I have very similar interests in podcasts that we listen to about motivation and about the expert rule and 10,000 hours and all of these sorts of things. I know this just from listening to your things, but things about sometimes making goals public is runs counter to our ability to do them, because we kind of already envision completing them. We already get a lot of the accolades. So that's great, Jason. That's going to be fantastic. And it actually, some of our desire to complete the project goes away because we've already received a lot of the advantages or the rewards of just by saying that this is something that we're going to do.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. Like knowing when making things public can be a great incentive, but it can also it can kind of crush. There are definitely projects I do that I intentionally don't breathe the word about until a certain point,
right? Because
I know that's tricky. That comes with experience.
Yeah,
I think when people are starting out something.
Mm-hmm.
In general, the more public, the better, because it gets people to potentially buy into what you're doing and create an audience and generate interest and just learning how to talk to people and build that following. Those are just amazing skills for whatever you want to do in life. So getting started on that is extremely helpful.
Yes. Yeah. Interpersonal skills, that can be beneficial.
Well, yeah.
If you're going to work around people.
Well, okay. Whatever you're doing in life, and this is totally from Tim Ferriss, but really from Scott Adams of Dilbert fame, is combining anything with public speaking is a winning combination. So if you can good Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert cartoon, incredibly intelligent guy, and his philosophy is what it takes to be Michael Jordan and what it takes to get on the Bulls. It's so much harder to be Michael Jordan than to make the Bulls. It's still hard to make the Bulls.
Right.
But to be Michael Jordan is a factor of 100 more.
Right.
So trying to be 90th percentile in a couple things, or 80th percentile even, is a way better strategy than trying to be 99th percentile and something. And if you can make one of those things public speaking, you've really got some power behind you. So if you can be really good at photography and public speaking, all of a sudden, maybe not the best public speaker, maybe not the best photographer, but if you can be pretty good at those two, or I'm pretty good at, interviewing, I'm pretty good at WordPress management, I'm pretty good at marketing, pretty good at bass. So I have this mix of things, and I've worked on my public speaking. So that makes for a unique skill set that I could be way better at any one of those things.
Right.
But the power of having that combination of things is that's a good thing for people to think about, I think, because you can fix it. I want to be the next Hal Robinson or Edgar Meyer, this or that.
Right.
And that's a great goal.
Right. What's the saying? Great is the enemy of good.
Yeah. Good is the enemy of great.
Good is the enemy of great.
Yeah.
So the idea being that, make something very good and get done with it, finish it, and move on to the next thing. Finish the project rather than waiting until it's perfect and then never completing it.
Well, the one in terms of projects I love is done is better than perfect.
Yes,
right?
That's what I'm going for. Yeah.
I mixed that up when I was doing an interview once. And I was like, perfect is better than done, and the guy's like, yeah, I think it's the opposite actually, but it's
that was a test. Yeah. I want to work for you now. Well, I had this thought a few minutes ago about habit forming, and to do the things that you're doing, you really do have to have good habits. We're talking about not just a stick-to-itiveness, but having a routine and a cycle of staying engaged with your audience and these sorts of things. And I wonder about another one of these, like the benefits of music education, if we ever to sell it, about just the benefits of habit forming that we learn from learning the instrument. Just because we have to we can't go and practice 100 hours in 100 hours and get the same benefit that we if we spread it out over a month. And so I don't know. Do you see any of that, like the skills that you learned as you were creating your skills as a bassist? Did they help you into the rest of your career, or do you think that?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's like those skills, like learning, like that's a beautiful thing about learning. It's like you're learning a craft. You learn how to actually do something to a high level, and how to actually focus on something, and how to actually get from point A to point B.
Yeah,
and that translates over so well. I mean, I think for me, for what I do, it's absolutely. I see practicing in what I do every single day, and like I know that I'll be better at what I'm doing in a month than I am right now, and I know that I'm better now here than I was last month, and I'm way better than I was a year before, and I feel the same thing with bass, and it's like daily practice, things you do every day, experimenting, trying new things, taking breaks, knowing when you're on and when you're off. I've gotten so much out of the musician type of mindset for working, which I think is more focused for maybe a short amount of time than like the slow burn office work kind of thing where you're kind of working for 8 hours a day. A huge thing for me with discipline and focus and work on things is I've been doing 25-minute Pomodoros, for a while. Sure. I don't do that every day. But I do it at least a couple days a week, and I just like hit it. I start my timer, and 25 minutes I just focus on one thing to the exclusion of anything else. Then I stop and I force myself to take 5 minutes. And I find that I get an incredible amount done during those days. So I think that the musician, but at the same time, I have days where I purposely let myself dream, and I set no timers.
Perfect.
And I let myself drift, and I try to state change. I try to go on a walk, and I try to do, and I think that, I think that being a musician and just thinking, like having your work be something creative has really helped me with doing what I'm doing now, which you could see as less creative, maybe than performing.
I think that podcasts, yours included, and earbuds, and having all that content on my phone at all times has taken away a lot of that daydream, creative, exploring bored time. We used to just, standing in line at the grocery store sort of thing. It used to be, or driving and all the times that or washing the dishes or mowing the yard and all the things that I now fill up with podcasts. Every once in a while, I have to, consciously turn it off and go for, one of the drives around the Metroplex to a gig is 45 minutes. And it's amazing how much, with no radio on, no nothing, and just, or going for a walk, same sort of thing, how all of these ideas can either come together or the birth of new ideas and new possibilities. So I'd say that is absolute genius. They talk about meditation, about like saying single-mindedly focused on something so that you can clear your mind of all the clutter. But I think also just kind of giving yourself time to let the clutter spin around and just notice it and just keep let the ideas keep bouncing around until they get into larger and larger things. Well, I have a specific time that I do that because I have the same. I mean, I think a lot of us like music, and like I listen to a ton of podcasts these days too. So I fill a lot of that time. One time in particular that I try to reserve is I have the luxury of a pretty flexible schedule right now. So like I'll do some work in the morning, then I'll go for a run, and then I will intentionally turn off everything about 20 minutes in, and just sort of like as I'm cooling off and walking home, there's something about working for a few hours and then running that really sort of like, it's like I've been thinking and then I've done something physical and state change, and that's the time when a lot of ideas kind of come together. And also, like for me, I think I'm really I'm constantly I'm going through different moods throughout the day, and somewhere it's like I want to be a sponge, somewhere I don't want to think about anything, and some when I like, and I've been working on trying to really listen to my gut, I guess, or whatever, and knowing those moments when it's time to let
ideas come together. And I have my phone with me, and I use Evernote, and I'll just like write down ideas when I have the right moment.
Sure.
And just trying to like listen to those unconscious parts, you know.
Yeah, and I do the same thing. You know, I use Google Docs, and actually I use Evernote as well. Recital programs, daydreaming about recital programs, putting stuff together that has a theme to it, and just projects like articles to write, or compositions that one of these days. I wrote Opus 1.
Really?
Yeah, and it's just a simple 4-voice choir a cappella thing. And but yeah, it was my Opus 1, man. There can be only one.
I can't wait. Hopefully there'll be an Opus 2. And
but you know, you get inspiration, and you hold all these ideas in your head, and it's great to let them swim around and cultivate and just daydream on them for a long time. Like those articles that I wrote recently. Before I took any notes or did any sort of outline or anything, I was just started to fill up all of my daydream time with things I wanted to talk about, and things that were just kind of recurring themes that kept coming up in teaching. And the first article, the swap article that was on sound production,
right, I remember that,
geared toward non-bassist string teachers. So I presented a pretty popular, you know, many people have done it at ASTA conferences and at TMEA here, the Texas Music Educators Association, about kind of comprehensive sessions that teach non-bassist orchestra directors about things about the bass and its quirks and nuances, and so I tried my hand at that, because it is really, there are a lot of really thirsty people out there that want to feel more comfortable with approaching the double bass. And so I had this litany of things that I wanted to address that were basically like, I would like you all to fix all these bow holds before they come to work with me, you know, and that just like totally selfish and just common issues. And it was all well-meaning, but it wasn't quite on par. So I started walking around in the days at the conference before I gave the presentation, and talking with orchestra director colleagues of mine, and said, you know, this is what I'm going to do. And oh, that's great. And I was like, yeah, what would you like me to address? And what summed it up best was one of my friends said, how do I keep from looking like an idiot? And I completely threw out the script at that point in time, and I had, you know, very little time to put together the presentation that was going to come up, and so it totally changed the focus to how can we get rid of the fear of this instrument? How can we set you up to be most successful if you're going to demonstrate for your middle schoolers and you're a violinist? And how can we approach this from a place of familiarity? Let's start with all the technique that you've been studying on your instrument, on the violin, viola, cello for decades, and talk about most of that transfers directly to the instrument. It's physics, you know, it's exactly the same processes, but because of the size of the instrument, the way we hold it, the number of fingers we can use, which again just goes back to size, how do we modify the things that you already know so that you're still within your comfort zone and don't feel like you're approaching this like it's like it's the contrabassoon or something like that. So and that grew into doing it at other places, eventually into a 5-hour hands-on class at ASTA, so one of the pre-conference sessions where we had a bunch of orchestra directors got basses for everybody, and then I've ended up doing that around the Metroplex at a couple of different places, and it's great. I mean, to get them actually hands-on experience, and in a couple of hours, get them to the point where they're like, okay, now I know that I've got to adjust the end pin if I am more comfortable sitting down, which most of them are, if they're, you know, not used to balancing the bass. Sit down, get the instrument the right height, set yourself up so that you have the best chance of playing it right the first time, and yeah, it's been really, really great and fun to work with all these teachers and see the light bulb just click on them. And
it's a pain point for a lot of music educators. So it's great that you're connecting with them.
They just look over at the basses and they're like, I have no idea what you guys are doing, but it sounds great, and I'm so proud of you for figuring it out. Keep it up. I love you guys. You know, and it's all, and that's totally genuine. but they all want to be able to approach it more. They want to be able to look at the score and have an idea of good fingering options for difficult passages, and they look over and they see these kids shifting on every single note, and it doesn't sound quite as good for some reason, right? And so anyway, I hope to expand that at UTA. Here we go, saying it out loud in public to a bunch of people.
There we go.
Yeah, I have a string shop that wants to sponsor it and supply all the basses.
Oh, nice.
So we could have people come for a day or a weekend, and even get some bass ensemble stuff together, really get them playing a little bit, and just have a kind of bass fest for the non-bassist string teachers, because they're hungry for it.
Yeah. So. What do you use the iPad for? iPad Pro for?
Everything. So, okay, I started using the iPad before I had the Pro, when I had a Mini that I could use for coaching chamber music. It was the first time that I started using it, kind of putting the Fourscore application to work. And I thought it was just great. Just like the ability to annotate the scores. You could use different colors, and then be able to send a copy to the score to the musicians that had just finished the coaching. And so it could show everything that we were working on and what their assignments were for coming up next, what parts to work on, what to focus on. And the use of colors is great because I could put the date in red, and then the next week I could put a new date in blue, and then it would see if it was new stuff or if it's the same thing that keeps coming up and they still have the same issues. It's got 3 different colors, circled 3 different times. And or I could start with a fresh copy and say, all right, let's do a run and let's see how things are. And then the other great part of that is that I was able to move like 400 of my scanned scores onto the machine in like 3 minutes. So if you ask me something right now, like, hey, I had a question about this sort of thing, and I probably have the music with me, so we could look at it really quickly. So,
yeah, that. I remember in 2002 or 2003 or something like that, my first scanner, like scanning everything that I use for teaching. And I still use those parts this day for my teaching. And Fourscore, I totally dig, and I've got marked up. I got my, my up bow, down bow stamp that I use, all that sort of stuff. Emailing parts to students. What other apps do you use for like teaching purposes on the iPad?
I have 2 others that I like to use. One is GoodNotes, and it gives me the ability to type text, but I can also use as a default paper, music paper, just staff paper. And so there's certain things that I've always been typing and keeping track of lesson notes. But to be able to use the Apple Pencil or stylus and be able to write, it's so much quicker to just write articulations and rhythms and stuff like that than it is to say, dotted 8th note 16th. There's a lot of things to type instead of just writing it out, or fingerings for an arpeggio or something like that. It's really handy. And I used to use Microsoft Word for lesson sheets and whatnot, but this just adds to it quite a bit.
Don't use, and you're like all iPad Pro these days, right? When I saw you perform, weren't you using the iPad and then a foot pedal for performances too?
Yeah, I use it as much as I can, except when I think it might make people uncomfortable.
Okay.
Like if I show up to an orchestra gig that's indoors, and I say that because the iPad's just great for outdoor playing and pit playing and stuff like that, where you have to use a light or you're going to have your pages blow away. But it turns too many heads. It's conspicuous at this point in time. People come in and they're like, hey, what's that? So what happens if it doesn't work? What are you going to do? And
what happens if your music blows off the stand? What are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly. We have all issues. And just like anytime we use some new technology, there's going to be mistakes that come up, because like the first time I had a C extension or played a 5-string, I made lots of mistakes. Every time we add something, it takes a little bit of time to get used to it and get into a flow with it. So.
Yeah, I remember playing an outdoor gig in Wisconsin, regular sheet music, and this big plexiglass piece of, just like to keep the music from blowing away, that my stand partner brought. And of course the plexiglass, like the wind caught it and it blew and it like landed on my jackstand and put this giant dent in the jackstand.
Right.
Oh man, I totally dig the iPad and the foot pedal, and like it's unbelievable the technology that's available to us? When did you start doing that?
It's been fairly recently. I've had the iPad Pro only since Christmas, and it was maybe 2 semesters earlier, so maybe last spring, that I started using the iPad Mini for chamber music coaching. And but having the Apple Pencil, I would say stylus because this will work on other platforms. So I just went with the Apple version because I'm, like a lot of people I know, heavily entrenched in the whole infrastructure of Apple products. But it's great for solo playing, and I do a lot of duo playing, and we usually will play off the score. And because there's only 2 of us, we don't really have a lot of rests to turn pages. And so it's either you have 15 pages long and the audience can't see you and you can't see the first 3 pages or the last 3 pages, or you have to blow them up or make them tall and shrink them and do all sorts of things like that. And so using the foot pedal is really handy. Interesting thing that I had to change about my setup is I was a left foot up on the rung player.
Oh.
And to turn pages with your right foot, you've got nothing holding you up. You're kind of got all your body weight into that right foot. And so if you try to lift it up to turn the page, you're going to fall out of your stool.
Right.
So I started using a yoga block at that point in time. Yeah, and I had been a big proponent of it with my students because I like the way that it takes some load off the knee and off the hips, but I guess I just didn't want one more thing to carry around.
Understandably.
But now I use a yoga block. I found out a couple of good ways of carrying it around, so I'll just shove it up between the rungs of the stool, of the legs of the stool, and it sticks. Or I use one of those bass buggy straps, and the big long straps that go along the bass. You can tuck it under that, and it works out pretty well. And then I keep like 2 in my office, 1 in my car, and 1 at the home studio. So, so I just pulled out the iPad to show Jason a little bit more of how I use it in my teaching. So at first I showed him the Good Notes program with music notation or staff paper.
Right.
You can edit that out, right? and then how I use Fourscore with all its different markings and so forth to email everybody.
Wait, so is this Fourscore that I'm looking at right now?
This is Fourscore.
So Fourscore allows you to do. We're looking at purple and blue and all sorts of colors, and Jack's written rehearsal numbers on this, and you use different colors for different rehearsals, right?
Yeah, I would say it's February 2nd, and I just write the date with the color that I'm using that time. Okay. So yeah, you can pick a color and then change it, or it's very handy for using in performance as well because you have an important repeat or something like that. The coda, the third time, that sort of thing. It's handy. You use different colors, or if you have repeats all over your page and it's hard to jump from one to the other, you've got some repeats marked in blue and some in red. Right. It's really easy on the eye to be able to tell where to jump to. And Jason was saying earlier that he's used the stamps, so you can use these down bows and up bows that are really, they look like they look like they came with the part. And the funny thing that I've noticed is that I don't trust those as much as the handwritten ones because I've played
handwrite. Okay.
Yeah, I used to do it really clean and beautiful with like a stamped on number 4 instead of the fingering but I've gotten so used to doing cello transcriptions, and it's got the cello fingerings in there and not really paying attention to those fingerings. But if I see this huge mess of fingerings that are like that, and I see one handwritten one of my fingers, just one, that's the one that I know I've got to, is if I play that one, then everything else in the passage is intuitive. So, yeah, it's funny. I've made that realization. I'm more likely to follow the bowings and such if I handwrite them.
Interesting. So, yeah, makes sense.
Who knew? Who knew? So yeah, and then being able to share the PDF all marked up and send it to a chamber music group, and it's really handy. Or coaching a lesson when they get really close to the performance time and so forth, and we don't need to be writing out like exercises and typing out things, and so I use that tool different times depending on where we are in the process. But if somebody comes in and they want to play their like excerpt list for an audition, it's so great to pull up the score, a fresh copy of it each time they play, and because you can save different versions of it. Right. So pull up a fresh version, do the markings on it. Here's what I heard. Here's this and that and that, and then you can have a clean copy again, and it's just super. And with IMSLP and other stuff, like I have violists come and they want to play a Brahms sonata for me. Okay, hold on just a second. And in 90 seconds, I've got the whole score, the whole piano score with me for coaching or something. And it's great. It's a super handy tool.
Well, and Foursquare is so great because you can organize the music in different ways with it.
Yeah.
Right. You can. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I can show him my set lists for the things that I have coming up. So my chamber music I'm doing this time, the all-state repertoire that I work on for clinics and workshops and some private students. I have my next Fort Worth program, my next Plano program. I have some of my recital program for this coming year. So I'm doing 2 recitals coming up, a chamber music recital and a chamber music. No, the other one is a duo. Just got this in the works where we're going to do Lori Laitman's Holocaust 1944.
Oh, wow.
That's for bass baritone voice and double bass, like 45-minute piece with just the 2 of us. So that's going to be great. And then other stuff is like Vaughan Williams piano quintet, Lori Laitman, 4 on the floor. Sorry, Libby Larson.
4 on the floor.
Yeah, 4 on the floor.
That piece. Yeah.
Lori Laitman is the Holocaust. And Schulhoff Concertina. So that'll be a bass-centered chamber music piece. And then after this competition, I mean, there's so much repertoire that is new that I would like to learn and stuff that I've kind of worked on a little bit here and there. That I would love to do again, or stuff that I've played in our performances, but to hear it with some fresh take and such great artistry is really inspiring to go back and do more of that.
What gets you excited about learning new stuff? So like here, like obviously I feel the same way here at the competition. Like I'm seeing all these great players. I'm hearing all these great pieces. And like throughout the year, like are there any like repeated moments that happen for you? Like what gets you real jazzed up about learning new music or going and practicing the bass?
I have discovered more music in the last 5 years than I'll be able to play in my entire life. And I'm still searching for repertoire and just curious about repertoire and what's out there for the double bass. And whether it be transcriptions or pieces that are originally written for the instrument, modern, old, early music stuff. I have, like I said, variety's my favorite. I don't stick to one particular thing. I have lots of interest in different styles of music and different composers. But as far as deciding on repertoire for programs, you usually have a piece that I really want to play for some reason or another, and then kind of fit a program around it. And it's usually just one piece that kind of dictates the timing and the style, and I don't want it to be too much of this or too much of that. Or I've come across a piece that I think is really cool that I think one of my students is just going to love. And I know their style and the pieces that they want to learn, and so I'll program those to inspire them. Say they're not ready to play that rep yet, but they're playing something in a similar style at a lower difficulty level, and then they get up to the next level so much quicker. They're so excited to move on and play that other repertoire. I'm a big fan of the interlibrary loan service that we have at UTA. We don't have a very good music library. We don't have any intent of becoming a doctoral program for music. But the interlibrary loan has been very, 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 very nice to me. And at the beginning of this semester, I think my stack from the interlibrary loan is about 2 feet tall already. And so that includes chamber music that I want to play with my colleagues. It's teaching pieces. It's pieces that I didn't know about, that I just learned about, that I want to check out the scores and see if it's something that I want to perform sometime in the future. Sometimes I get really excited about something that sounds great on paper, and I get it, and it's for like a second-year bass player. It's in 2 positions. It's like, okay, well, let's go ahead and send that back. But coming and hearing the performers here is also great too. You hear even the standard repertoire just played, and you think like, man, it never occurred to me that it could actually go that much faster and still sounds so elegant or graceful, and just they're just blowing the doors off the possibilities of what we can accomplish. Yeah,
you got a Jackstat.
I do.
And you have a Hatches.
I do.
Bass.
Yeah.
When did you get the Jackstad. I know the Hatches is more recently. What's the story? Those are your two main basses.
Those are my two main basses. Yeah, I bought the Jackstad from Brian Perry, who's also on the Braditich Foundation board. He's Dallas Symphony ISB board as well.
Yeah,
and he and I were students together at North Texas at the same time. And that was the bass that he was playing while we were in school, and he went off to his master's and won his first job on that bass. And then he was looking to upgrade to the bass we now affectionately call Big Red. It's a beautiful, large pattern American school Prescott-looking bass. And he's since upgraded again to an even more beautiful Italian bass. So yeah, I just had my 10-year bass anniversary coming up on 11 in December that I've been playing on that instrument, and it was amazing. It was an amazing jump forward in playing an instrument that was so solid. I was playing a much older, 100-year-old bass before that, and it just hasn't had any issues. I have seams that I need to glue up every once in a while, but it's just a powerhouse in all registers. It's just really comprehensive. If you had to have one bass and we're playing orchestra and playing recitals and chamber music, I'm a really big fan of like the tone for the money that you get out of those instruments. I know you have one as well.
I do indeed.
Yeah, they're great. They're great instruments. And then recently I had commissioned a new bass with a removable neck, and it looked like it was going to be quite a long time before it was going to be available. And the Hatches came through town. The Robertsons had come through town with a bunch of instruments, and I was looking for something that was a little easier to get around than the Jackstad, even though I'd been playing, all this Bottesini repertoire and concertos on the big bass, and it was okay, but it's a lot of work, to reach up there. I had to completely change the way that I sat with the instrument, held the instrument to get with the ribs as deep as they are, and I don't have the longest arms, and so I was looking for something a little bit more comfortable, and especially something to travel with, because the big, huge flight case in the Jackstad is a lot to carry around, and then go play a recital after you've been pushing the bass around. So then the Hatches came along, and I wasn't shopping for any other basses. I already decided on a maker and put a deposit down, and had been talking woods and specs and string lengths and varnishes and all of this sort of stuff. And but I was still a couple of people down the line from when that instrument was going to get built, and so I decided to give the Hatches a try, just as a comparison, but wasn't really interested, and was just blown away with the sound. I mean, it just has so much sound, and it already had the removable neck, so that part of it was a known quantity rather than the maker I was working with. It was going to be the first removable neck.
Sure.
And timing was great as well. That we had the premiere of the Michael Dougherty coming up in a month, and it was going to be much easier to get around that than on the Jackstad, and it's an inch and a half shorter string length than the bass I've been playing on for 10 years, and so I borrowed it and I played my first recital on it in like 3 weeks.
Wow!
And let's just say it was very easy to overshoot some big shifts up in the thumb position, and the fingerboard is. It's a 3-octave plus fingerboard, and so if you're used to even using the end of the fingerboard as a little bit of a visual reminder, that was no no good either, and that would lead you to overshoot even more. So it was exciting, but yeah, I've been really happy with the instrument, and it's beautiful. Just the varnish and the wood on that instrument is just. I've missed it when I was first trying it out. I missed an entrance in the orchestra, and I brought it in to play with an orchestra. And I was just staring down at the ribs and the C-bout and just the curl of the maple, and just totally missed the entrance. And it was just like
that's a good reason to miss an entrance.
Yeah. It was like I might damage the varnish with drool, but that's like the most danger that I have around that instrument. But it's really, really phenomenal. And my wife has a really amazing violin as well, and a bow arm to match. She's got just one of the best bow arms in the business, and so trying to compete with bass and violin and all this duo repertoire that we've been playing, the bass is already at a disadvantage because of the tessitura, and just the brightness of sound in a big room. And so this bass has definitely helped out a lot in that range, where I don't have to work as hard to fill a big room, and compete with the violin as much. So,
I've played on a couple of smaller hatches solo basses, and I've played certainly on the bigger hatches.
Yeah.
What are some differences between the sound and the responsiveness of the jackstat versus the hatches?
So I always thought the hatches was a little bass.
Yeah.
But it fills up a 3/4 bag.
It does.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's
not little.
Well, it is compared to his other model, which is the 7/8, right? It's the Busan model, and this is the Roca model. That's the 3/4, and they are kind of loosely patterned on instruments that he came across that he was restoring, that he was really blown away by, and so he kind of took the best attributes aesthetically and sound production wise, and then modified them to try to improve upon them. And then the workmanship on it, it's just unbelievable. I mean, it's his care and craft is just unbelievable. I mean, the more you stare at his work, it's really, really astounding. As far as the sound, like playing a solo repertoire, you can hear yourself so much better with the hatches. It just puts out a clearer sound under the ear. In the orchestra, it's a different experience because of the clarity, where the jackset has so much cushion and such a encompassing sound. It's much less directional. I perceive it that way, where I'm sitting, and I think my stand partner probably feels the same way, that there's just a kind of compression and darkness to the jackstat that's really beautiful sound in the orchestra. But I think if you get on the other side and you ask the violins if they could notice a difference, I don't think they would get the same experience between the two. And getting out in the hall and stuff like that, or when I first was looking at the bass and playing the bass, I let everybody play the instrument to try it out and tell me what they thought, and I would be backstage, and I would come around the corner and be hearing this big dark sound and assume it was one of the guys playing these house-size orchestral basses, and somebody's playing the hatches, and it sounds beautiful. I mean, it can function in any environment. It's not just a solo bass. It excels as projection, and as you get in the upper register, the sound just really accumulates, and it keeps building on itself, and it just rings like crazy. But playing it in the orchestra, I think it's also well suited for that environment and chamber music. And I played the Prokofiev quintet right after I got it as well, and not having to deal with the big ribs on the jackstat, and just sure. It was so much better suited for that type of music for me and my physique and whatnot. But having the choice of both basses, I still gravitate toward playing the jackstat in the orchestra and playing the hatches in other environments. But they both function well in both. It's not a. I'm in a good place, No,
this is two great
instruments.
I'm certainly a fan of both, and have enjoyed playing on both. My stand partner in Memphis for years and years had a hatches, the big orchestral, powerhouse hatches, and loved playing on it and the sound, and
and they're gorgeous. I mean, it's a piece of art to make art, and it's great to be inspired by the instruments, where you can just look at them and
You were a jazz major early on?
Yeah, that's how I came to the double bass, was that I was playing electric, and part of the degree program basically is that you have to play double bass, which I totally agree with. It's weird to hear Basie and Ellington with an instrument that hadn't been invented yet. It's tuba and the handle orchestra sort of thing.
Right.
So I studied with Chuck Israels, and former Bill Evans bassist, who started playing with Bill Evans after Scott LaFaro passed away. And continued with it when I first got to North Texas. But I like I told you before, I had just kind of was big fish in a small pond, and then jumped into the ocean with all these sharks, and the classical. I was so far behind with classical with the bow, and I had never played a bowed instrument or an instrument without frets until I was 21, and even then didn't start really working on classical for another year at least, and.
So you were 22 when you started really focusing
I had my first. I heard my first classical teacher. I started taking lessons with somebody that was like, "All right, you're," and to be quite honest, this is exactly what she said. She said, "You really have to start working with the bow more because your intonation's so bad. I can't even tell what notes you're trying to play." So I was like, "All right, so we're not going to work on my line. We're got some other issues to work on." And so she, worked with me to get a great sound. And through the sound, I found classical music. My parents didn't listen to classical music. There was no, real strong orchestral program in Juneau, Alaska that was, less than 30,000 people at the time. And so the first avenue I went into was, playing in a tango group, a quintet that was kind of a mix of jazz and classical. So I was doing a lot of pizzicato and bowed playing. And it was a fun dance band, so we would literally go and play for 200 tango dancers. And then playing through the orchestra, and I ended up splitting my senior recital, half classical and half jazz, and then did jazz studies through my master's degree. It was my minor, so I took a lot of the courses at North Texas, and they have a great jazz program, as everybody knows. And
yes.
And was surrounded by great colleagues, other students there, and working hard to play catch up. I'm still playing catch up, aren't we all?
So that early teacher, that teacher got you to focus on creating sound.
Yeah.
Like how did she, it was a woman? How did she?
Yeah, Anna Doak.
Okay, how did she do that?
Well, I can tell you that one of the most enriching parts of it was the idea of sustain and growth. I'd been an electric guitarist, electric bassist, and a drummer, and it was all pluck and decay. And I'm not saying you can't shape like that, but just the idea of having growth and opening up a sound like that was really great to see how you could grow a line. As far as just technique, are you asking about that, like how to hold the bow? And when I started my second year with her, I was playing a German bow from the percussion studio. It had 19 hairs on it, and she played French, and so I quickly switched over to French because I didn't have a whole lot invested in the German bow, just a year, and so. Yeah, she's from the Nanny lineage, through one of the Seattle Symphony bassists. So that's my path through Nanny, and then through Braditich, I go back to Samandel and to ballet as well. So I've studied with people from the three main paths to double bass. But I can't really remember, honestly, Jason, about what sort of technical exercises or anything like that we did to really work on sound production itself.
There's a bass. So Michael Avnani, who I studied with, is from Seattle.
Seattle. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
How old is he?
Yeah, he's around 50 right now.
So was he there with Max Demoff? Was he at that same point in time, or he was a little younger?
No, he was a little. Well, no, but he knows Max. But Michael studied with a bass player, I think named Jim Harnett in Seattle, who wrote this method book.
Really?
That's one of the more fascinating things I've seen in the world of bass. Self-published method book, and it's all about bass and Renaissance painting, and how the use of the weight of the bow corresponds with the use of black in Renaissance paint. I mean, it's real heady stuff.
Nice.
But the guy, he was kind of like a bass genius. He had all this lateral positioning technique that he called it, and he had all these things on this graph paper. It looked like football plays. But totally fascinating.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Is he still in the symphony?
No, I'm
still
not
alive?
sure if he's still around.
You're gonna edit this part, right?
Yeah. I don't. But it was Michael lent me the book, and it was just like totally like left field, but fat and really interesting. And there's definitely something there. It was kind of like he's kind of this early bass genius that was kind of out there in the Pacific Northwest, kind of like doing his thing, and you know, it didn't really connect with like the broader bass world, but it influenced Michael a lot in terms of positioning and that sort of stuff.
Cool. It's very cool. I mean, what a testament to the non-standardized path and technique to the double bass. Just it's still such an open book. Yeah. Wow. So he's like the Roboth of the Pacific Northwest.
I think so.
Just pioneering and but what a brain it sounds like as well. So
who's going to win? I can edit this out too, but who's going to win the Bradford competition tomorrow?
So we have two people playing the Proto 9 variants on Paganini, and we have Bottesini number 2, and what is the other?
And then
Martin, right? Andres Martin.
Yeah, then Andres Martin.
Okay. We have a lot of bass players on the panel. I would say if it was an open panel, Bottesini would have a higher chance of winning.
Because it's so familiar?
Than Bottesini with a panel of bass players. Yes.
Yeah.
The 9 variants compared to the Martin. Do you know both of those pieces?
I know the Martin concerto fairly well.
Yeah?
Yeah. I don't know the Proto that well.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of it, compositionally rather than
player-wise.
Because the level is so high and the consistency has been so high with the players that are performing. So I'm thinking about what might make an impression upon the panel. So I'm guessing that familiarity-wise, maybe the Andres Martin has the least amount of familiarity. So if, let's say, you get the novelty of the piece, you get the flexibility of inaccuracies or omissions that you wouldn't have with Bottesini number 2, so to speak.
Right.
So I think that has a very strong chance. I don't even remember who's playing which piece, and I'm saying I wouldn't be surprised if that piece and player come out ahead, just because it might have a little bit of a strategic advantage based on the repeatore selected.
I think Andres' concerto would have from my perspective, would have the highest audience appeal because it's his writing has a cinematic sort of quality to it. It's like a
Protos can as well.
Frank.
The
Frank
Carmen
can.
fantasy especially.
Yeah, that's true.
So, how do you say it? Andres Martin or Martin?
Martin? Well, he answers to all of the Andres Martin, Andres Martin.
Okay.
Andres Martin.
Andres.
I usually say Andres Martin because I think
But I probably learned it. I learned it from you, Jason. I learned it from you.
I've been trying to be better about
pronunciation.
Even if I know.
Yeah.
Because I say Brandon McLean, not Brandon McLean.
Ah, yeah.
So probably like a crap ton of bass players have heard me mispronounce his name. So even something like that where I've been trying to be really better about like Caroline Emery. I was like, I'm pretty sure it's Caroline, but what if it's Carolyn?
Right.
So I made sure to
It's not
ask.
You're never going to lose points for saying something correctly.
No, but it is awkward.
Yeah.
And with the whole interview flow, going back to we were talking about, actually we didn't. Well, but it's I have real specific, especially people I don't know, and I'm talking to them the first time. I my goal, I'm interviewing someone, is to get them comfortable, and to get them in the growth. We're just having a friendly conversation, and so being too pronounce your name now. Do this and this.
Right.
That's a very. It's sort of like kicking someone out of the
State
group.
your name.
Yeah.
For the record.
So now I ask at the end if I have any question, and it's very awkward because we had this good conversation. It's like, what's your name again? But my whole I used to for a long time. I'd talk with someone for 5-10 minutes before I interviewed them, or 20-30, and then I'd be like, all right, we're going to start the interview.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Welcome to Con. And this is,
and then
it would just like destroy the vibe.
Yeah.
And so it's all about like getting the vibe going. And I found that especially with people I don't know, that's almost more tolerable with people that I do know because they're like, okay, but like if you get that going, it's just like have it go. And so anyway, it's a long way of saying like I should have. Andres is Andres Martin.
Okay.
Let's just say, boom.
Sure. So, similar thing with photography. If I went and did your headshots, it's much better if I just start, say, hey, we're not starting right now. Like, I just need to do some metering and make sure exposure's right.
That's when you get the best
and while we're talking, I'll just be like snapping pictures. But don't worry, none of this is going to work. And then there's never a moment where we transition into that. We'll just keep talking, and I'll be like, yeah, that sounds great. I mean, so you're looking to use these headshots for your website? That's cool. Well, maybe turn just a little bit. Let's see if we can get the lighting better. Let me see how that is. Okay.
Oh, good. So I'm not alone.
Yeah. It's a segue. It's got to be a segue. Otherwise, I mean, if I point a camera at you right now, I bet everything changes.
Yeah, and especially if you're untrained and doing that all the time.
Yeah.
Like it's one thing if you're like, Beyonce, and you're just sort of like, your life is on camera. But especially for people I talk to a lot of the time, that's their first time they're doing something like that.
Yeah.
And then if they're tied into it, they're like, oh, that's popular. So then they like are the potential to like not be relaxed is like I don't know. It's something I was not like anybody doing any project. I was not particularly good early on. And I've consciously thought about like, and I've read, and Tim Ferriss has talked about this, so I've like, written down notes about what he does, and I think I've had a few interviews that I'm very proud of that could very easily have not been good interviews, but because of like just thinking about things like that, they were like people I had no connection with, and I was talking with without any sort of visual.
Yeah.
Like my preference is in person's the best.
Yeah.
Then FaceTime or Skype with camera.
Right.
Then FaceTime or Skype without camera. Then I'm calling your phone. And I've had some people like, I'm calling your phone. And so we have none of that, and I don't know you. But
oh man, my first phone interview was with it was either Strings Magazine or the Strad, and cool, right? First time somebody calling you to ask questions about one of their topics, and the article came out, and I was super excited. And I opened the article and I look at it, and they literally said the opposite of what I was trying to tell them. I mean, just total. It couldn't have been more black and white difference, and I just started to just loathe the idea, and I think it may have happened the second interview as well. It was probably me, just not knowing how to be clear in those sorts of situations with a phone interview, or giving enough time to take notes or something like that, rather than whatever happened. So then the first ASTA article came out, and when it came out, I was actually here in Denton for the base camp. I've been teaching the summer camp for 15 summers now, and I was at Mr. Braditish's house, and he got a copy. So it was there before I got my own copy at home. And I was telling that story about, oh man, I've just worried about this because they didn't contact me at all about edits and whatnot. Oh, I hope it's good. And Mr. Braditish starts reading it, and he's reading like what I wrote. And then he just goes off on this completely backwards tangent about all this just wrong stuff. And I was like, what? I mean, and it's the only time he's pranked me. And, I've known him, how long, and it took him that long to pull a prank. And he just, oh man.
Oh, that's great.
He got me so good. Yeah.
I that's funny that he did that. I've never been a fan of transcribe, and it's one thing because a lot of people that write articles for different publications,
right,
they'll do an interview and they'll write something based on that interview. But like a raw interview transcription, I've never been a huge fan of those because I think I'd rather like experience the interview, or I'd rather like read a piece. And so that's something a lot of people have asked, like, you should transcribe more of your. Well, first of all, that's annoying.
Yeah.
To do. And there is some value, but it's a media. It's something that I don't know. I don't think it translates as well onto the page.
Yeah. I mean, what we're doing. This is kind of the comedians in cars getting coffee, right? Sure. And here we are, bass players. In a beer garden in Denton, right? Which, no big shocker there to play into the stereotype a little bit. But so you got the two formats where you've got this casual just exploration and kind of, I don't think we finished any of the ideas that we started, any of the questions that we started.
Right.
But we just vamped on it for a little bit. Or we could do this in another way where you ask me a question and I take notes. And after 2 minutes, I say, all right, well, that's a very good question, and I would like to answer it in 3 parts.
Right.
You're right. And then you sit there and, tap your fingers and ask your next question, and I plan my answer and that sort of thing. Or I, have them all thought out from my committee, and I got my talking points, and then we move on.
Well, the thing I've been enjoying recently, I've only been doing is trying to like make mini documentaries, and I've only been doing this the last couple of months. But like talking to somebody like, and I don't do this all the time. It all depends on what and like how what if it's it's sort of like there's a guy named Alex Bloomberg who used to work for NPR, Planet Money, and he started this company Gimlet, and And his stuff is very much like This American Life, which is kind of like the highest level of an audio podcast in terms of production value. It's like incredibly time consuming, and you're talking to like dozens of people and stuff. And then the lowest, not that it's low, but the lowest level is just like turn it on, let it rip, publish
raw footage.
And I'm trying to do something in between these days, where it's like a little bit more. Trying to create some sort of narrative out of things, which is interesting, and I don't always do that, but sometimes, and so I don't know. It's an interesting format.
Yeah. I've noticed the 3-part.
Trying just always,
but
chapter
1.
It's always
exposition.
Chapter
2.
The struggle.
Conflict.
3, the lesson.
The conflict and denouement.
And in a month, I
it's
might
not
be
a bad
done
plan.
With that. No, it's not.
Been working for.
And the reason why I started doing that, and it is, first of all, I think it's good to experiment.
Yeah.
And I think that even if nobody's telling you to do anything different, I think it's good to try things, because you got like it keeps me interested, and a challenge for me is like, let's tell people stories. Let's rather than just, let's try to like make some and also like just whatever you're doing, and this is like depressing for anybody who's doing something, just starting something. You're competing with all of television, Netflix, all of music that can be accessible via Spotify or like all of Facebook, Instagram, so standing out is a challenge. And something that one of these NPR producers said in the podcast I was listening is like, if you're listening, you're like, and it's you talking to someone else, and you're like, I don't know, maybe I could cut that. They're like, that's a good instinct. Seize on that instinct. Because if you're thinking that, you're the most engaged possible person for that.
Right.
So that's more work on your part, but that's been something I've been thinking of a little bit more, is like, rather than putting out something that's like 90 minutes, putting out something that's like 45 killer minutes. And it's just something Tim Ferriss has been doing a lot of, which I really like, is his podcast. It's just like a digital audio tube that all sorts of content could go down with. So he's doing trying all sorts of, it's a very flexible medium. So that's what I'm playing with these days.
So what other things are you thinking about, like mini documentaries or? You already started adding like the weekly updates, which are short content.
I did that for a while, and I like that. I think that's good. And then I just started just like making blog posts about that stuff, because just trying to figure out what works and what it's experimenting.
Sure.
I was doing those in video form, and everything I do, I like to think of as an experiment, and then like watch reaction, and then also like think about like how much do I like doing,
and how much time did you put in on it?
How much time?
Right.
Yeah. So those are fun. They're a lot of time, and I think I get just as much engagement just like making a blog post about it.
Sure.
But I really like the idea of diving into topics, and then diving into like doing things, and not exclusively, but doing things that are really specifically about, and then also like we have so many people that are no longer with us in the bass world, but like telling their story.
Yeah.
It's like I talked to Oren O'Brien, and I'm talking to Don Pullman, all these people at Fred Zimmerman.
Right.
And I have Fred Zimmerman's practice tapes doing a Fred Zimmerman thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so
talk to Joe Conyers. So how's Norma? You know?
So I've been trying, even with people that I know they've had that contact with, even though I'm not planning on doing it right now, I make sure to ask a couple questions about that.
Sure.
So that in a year when I do that, I have that tape.
Right.
To do.
Right. Those are all good ideas. Yeah. So, how much are you going to cut this down?
I don't know. We'll see. My SD card is just about to run out. So,
any final thoughts, Jason? Any further questions?
It's good to hang out and chat on this. This is final thoughts. This is I just feel privileged to be at this event.
Me too.
Hanging out.
Yeah.
It's a beer. Chatting about bass,
like-minded people.
Yeah. If you had asked 20-year-old Jason what he'd be doing, it wouldn't be this. But if I could be like watching myself doing this right now and like look at this week, I'd be like, yeah, that's pretty cool. I'll sign up for that. So
absolutely.
Yeah, life's good.
Yeah, you think about going to the ISB this summer and this competition, and when was the last, like, how far back in history do you have to go to have heard this much great bass playing?
Yeah.
You know, so you got the last, 3 years or whatever, all condensed into just a few months. It's really, really great. And I've joked around with people sometimes where I tell them, like, oh, I did my undergrad here and my master's and doctorate, and then I did my postdoc with Jason Heath in contrabass conversations.
Oh, no.
Yeah, but it's true. It's true. Just driving around from, doing the gigging thing, that time in the car and mowing the yard and whatnot, just furthering the education, and it just never stops. We're all students, we're all researchers, we're all, I think once that stops, then the stagnation begins, that there's no arrival in this career, and just to keep pushing through. But I'm really grateful to sit down and talk to you, because I always have more questions, and when I listen to the interviews, I gain so much from it. There are things that I want to ask you about your thoughts, and so it's been a great opportunity just to pick your brain a little bit about some of the techie, goofy, and geeky stuff that we're both interested in, and then I'll circle around to the bass, and we'll talk rosin and strings off mic, I guess.
What strings do you use?
Yeah, there you go.
One. Yeah, it's like Stephen King. He says every session he ever does, within the first 10 minutes, someone asks, "What pencil do you use?" Right, you're right. I can tell you, but yeah, exactly. It should be the secret password. We have the big, the secret society of double basses. You come to the door and they're like, password. Yeah. What kind of strings do you use? Yeah, right this way, so your table's right up front here. Right. Yeah. The password's Kaplan's, Dario. Thank you. Sponsored by Dario Strings. Thank you, Lyris. Yeah.
Well, there you have it. Our conversation, Jack and I, the conclusion of our conversation from Texas, from hanging out in Denton, Texas. And if you have not listened to the first part of this, definitely go to contrabassconversations.com/Jack Unzicker. That will take you to the episode where you can listen and learn more about Jack's path, growing up in Alaska, studying in Washington, and then with Jeff Braditich, and how his career has unfolded. Remarkable musician, remarkable individual, and Jack and I have some more projects in store, super exciting projects, and I can't wait to share what we're up to. So thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you listening to this. If you want to reach out and say hi about anything, feedback@contrabassconversations.com will put you in touch. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.